Mental health is
Mental
mental
health?
wealth. You ever heard that one?
No.
I'm
No,
trying to
I
get it
haven't.
like in the vernacular. I'm trying to get people saying it. Mental health, they say health is wealth.
Yeah.
Health is
Yeah.
wealth. I'm sure you heard that.
Mental
Your father
health
was a
is mental
doctor.
wealth. Yeah. No, I mean that's the thing is he was of that era where he would even say this, doctors, well, with an Indian accent, doctors drop dead. Like they don't really practice what they preach. And
Hmm.
also, it's kind of amazing how much, and I blame TikTok or actually recognize TikTok for this. There's a lot, it's like the food pyramid. There's a tremendous amount of information that has shifted and changed in terms of what is healthy, what's not healthy, what actual exercise requirements are, how, it's like, oh, you need more protein, protein, red meat's not as bad as we thought. Protein is important. Yes, cardio is great, but you can't just do cardio. I remember before it'd be like, oh no, you can't just lift weights, but now it's like, oh, people are emphasizing strength training and you can't go too far one or the other. But there's definitely newer data out there. And I've heard this from friends who are doctors who literally said the research was wrong. The research was wrong. I'm living proof. I thought after I'd lost weight, oh, my doctor's going to be like, oh, your cholesterol's insane. You got to also stop eating that red meat. And turns out that I'm just genetically predisposed, and because I take a low-grade statin and I have a better overall body weight. Again, for me, not for everybody, but just for me, I've had optimal heart health for a while. Knock on wood. This is IKEA wood. I
Humble
could be
brag.
humble
Ollie's got a
brag.
good heart, huh? All right. Well,
I got the Aura ring. Yeah, it's doing. It tells me. I mean, according to the Aura ring,
yeah.
could be all.
Aura, we're ready for the brand money. We're ready. Back up the truck. Come on. Aura, where are you?
At least if I can get a year off. This is $6 a month, Neil.
Gee
Talking about
whiz.
401k. I know.
Well, all right. You're
Mm.
talking a lot about physical health, which is a good segue into mental health, which is the topic we're talking about today, because health is health and health is wealth and, health is stealth. I don't know. And call me Dr. Seuss. He wasn't a real doctor, was he? I don't think you could just we could just call ourselves doctors, and then write a children's book. I don't know.
I could definitely. I mean, can you imagine? The Pitt's a big series right now.
Sure.
I should probably talk to Dylan, my manager. Haven't talked to him in about 9 months. And maybe just be like, hey, what do you think about me getting on the Pitt? Throw a little stethoscope on, and I'll be like, I don't know what's wrong with the guy. That's me
You
as a
you
doctor.
you would play a character who's posing as a doctor.
Oh God, no! That was just me. Like we call this in the biz a weak read. Like he came in to audition, and agents looking for feedback. Yeah, he gave a weak read. He brought in his stethoscope, but he didn't have the white coat.
All right. Again, this is the mental health episode. So this is our big question series. This is our summer series, big question episodes. How to talk to kids about mental health. Oh my gosh, so much to talk about, so much to unpack.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to remind everyone, I've got a 7, almost 8-year-old. She's having
When
a
is
birthday soon.
Cece's birthday?
I'm not revealing that to the people who are going to then plug it in. And well, it's February. But yeah, it's Groundhog Day. All right.
Oh, really?
All right. I
Oh,
guess I
wow.
told everybody her birthday's
Yeah,
on
you
Groundhog.
gave that up quick. Jesus.
Yeah. Anyways, it's coming up. But when's this going to air? The summer. So, but this is our big question series. We are talking about mental health. I've got a almost 8-year-old, a 5-year-old. Ollie has a 14-year-old. But here's the thing about mental health, guys. I'm 40. Ollie's 47.
No, I'm 48.
All right. By this
I'm
time
going to
this
be
airs.
49 when this airs.
All right. Yeah. Anywho's, mental health's important no matter your age, but we're going to contextualize this at every age as we always do. And we're going to talk about, things you should know to empower your kids for mental health in a positive way so that they can feel stronger in the old noggin. How's that sound?
Yes. Yeah. And we're not talking physical noggin. We mean what's on the inside of the noggin.
Yeah, I mean it's all kind of related, but I want to ask you because again, you've got the 14-year-old. Has he ever kind of come to you and shared that he maybe wasn't feeling so good and up in the old head?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this is where I get to pull the old ace the ace up my sleeve, shrink, and remind everyone that my wife is a therapist. And so having a conversation about feelings is regular, it's common. Yeah, like it's once again the 340 reason of why I'm actually doing okay as a dad is because, as Greg Scheinman said, you can't be the world's greatest dad without the world's greatest mom. And when the world's greatest mom works in mental health, this helps as well. So, she initiates conversation. I think we both talk about it as well. And I think also the nature of being at the kind of school he does, because, Brearley worked there, so, you have a counselor that's very active, you know what I mean? The teacher to student ratio, or in this case, counselor to student ratio is quite low, and, you can check in with the counselor and have all that in there. So there's extra eyes, there's extra ears, plus, we normalize that conversation. So, when I think about it, and it's hard because, obviously he is 14, so we've definitely had some moments where, the feelings have come up and, he's sad, and thankfully nothing physical has ever happened that's ever made me as a parent feel the kind of hurt you feel when your kid is upset, So we've had these conversations, through 6th grade into 7th grade. And so far, things have kind of stabilized a bit. But, we have a pretty open dialogue, I guess you'd say. So he's never had a thing where it's like, hey, can I talk to you about being sad? It's like there's behavior, there's signs, and then we'll bring it up. You know what I mean? We bring it up all the time. As I think one should, My God, I'm in the middle school, Neil. I am in the trenches, baby,
Yeah. And have my kids asked? Thanks for following up with that, Ali. So
you're the quarterback in this situation. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm the glorified wide receiver, big contract,
okay,
kind of distracted.
So I know that means I'm the highest paid, and I'll probably have the most lucrative broadcasting career after. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, you're. In the end of the day, I need to be fed lines. You can actually give in-depth analysis.
Well, and you'll probably have more CTE. So.
Yeah, no, it's outlook not so good, speaking of mental health.
Anywho, I've noticed in the last few years my daughter will say things like, I feel sad and I don't know why, or I'm just feeling really scared right now. My brain won't stop racing, and this is normal. This is a huge part of how we get through life. But what do we do with all that? I want to talk a little bit about the distinction between mental health and mental illness, which obviously there's a huge overlap. I know you, Ollie, come from a family history of schizophrenia. Yeah, well, nice little feather in your cap. I come from a family history of bipolar, and
I bet we got a little of that in there too.
Sure.
Know?
They're all cousins of each other, these. And I myself, I think I've disclosed on this podcast, I've got the old OCD.
Sure. Is that a spinoff of the OC?
You don't seem impressed.
I was waiting for something bigger, like the other affliction you have, it's not Crohn's. What's the other one?
With a Lynch syndrome?
Lynch. There it is. David Lynch.
I know, I'm
it's weird.
Falling apart.
Everything with you has to do with film TV. OC, OCD, the OC. Obviously, David Lynch. I mean, how could you? It was obviously named after David Lynch. Why else would you call it Lynch?
He discovered this this genetic disorder. Of course, he was a great film director, but a lot of people don't know he was also like a cancer researcher.
That's where he made his money. You know what I mean? Yeah. The movies were a side
hustle. That's why he chain smoked every day.
Touche.
Anyway,
you're right.
So, I grew up in the 90s when mental health was not really a phrase that was uttered often, if at all. Perhaps accidentally people paired those words, but it wasn't a thing. Mental illness was something that was to be hidden. It was private. It was not to be discussed publicly. And look how far we've come in the last few decades. We're doing a podcast about mental health, Huh? Look at that.
Truly, truly groundbreaking. I think that this podcast is actually making up for society's failure in addressing mental health the same way we address physical health ailments. So
we're real renegades here, huh?
good for us. Or, or just, we are the second coming of the Messiah in terms of that. Yeah, that might resonate to some listeners. Maybe not to you and me, but I'm thinking about the big picture right now.
All right. Well, look, we blather on, we pontificate. What is the point? Why are we doing this? Let's set up the big question. Today's big question: how do we talk to kids about mental health in a way that actually helps them, not scares or silences them? How's that?
I think it's fine. It's interesting. You got me thinking about your experiences with mental health with your kids because, I don't know, it's a different age. I mean, middle school, it's like the catch-22 is I feel like there's more opportunity for these things to come up, but at the same time, like, I forget that your kids are the age that they are. I feel like Cece, never met her, but I feel like she's, maybe a little more mature, or maybe just the whole cliche girls are more mature than boys or whatever. It's got to be a different, kind of in some way, in a bluey way, a more adorable conversation. Like, I feel sad, you know what I mean? Maybe Cece doesn't sound like that, but maybe Zeke has a little bit of that in there, just a smidge, just a touch.
Yeah.
Whereas mine's more like, proper teen drama. It's
Sure.
proper. No, it's like just pure, not easy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's definitely precocious. My wife has referred to her as her grades Tracy Flick. But in hindsight, from Election, the book and film.
Whoa, there you go. I remember the movie. Not the character names, but good to know. Good to know. With you now. I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the funny thing is, everyone, she was kind of the antagonist, but in hindsight, and this is kind of the thing we talk about, reframing, what did she do wrong? She was an ambitious woman. She worked hard and wanted to be rewarded for it. And really, in the end, I think the coda of the film shows that, she ends up in Washington working either as or for a high-powered politician. And what's Matthew Broderick doing? He's just having a Slurpee, throws it at the limo. Spoiler, that's the end of the film. Anywho, yeah, that's right.
Cece's set.
Yeah, well,
we got to talk about Zeke next. I mean, I'm excited for her future.
What's the definition of mental health? I'm glad you asked, Ollie. Mental health is your emotional, psychological, and social well-being, affecting how you think, feel, and act, influencing stress handling, relationships, and choices. And here's the thing, it's crucial at every life stage. It's not like mental health kicks in when you're a teenager. Mental health, it's just like health. It's like saying, oh, you don't have health when you're 3. Healthy 3-year-olds, and sadly, we know unhealthy 3-year-olds on those TV commercials. Mental health is the same thing. What's true? I'm trying to make the analogy here. Yeah, I know.
I can't. I'm not going to be able to.
You're like a kid in church.
I can't. You just made me think about the 3-year-old who's like, at first it's like, it's cold, I can't sleep. There's that. And then there's like the serious medication commercial where it's like, it helps cancer. Like, I'm just dying right now. Okay, we're back on
commercials about the St. Jude's commercials, just as a quick aside, is like, they always get the most like red-blooded man to be like, oh, I looked at my wife and said, honey, something's not right. And we went over to St. Jude's. And you're just like, they're like straight out of Central Casting,
I know. Well, I mean, the other thing too, more importantly, is like how you mock that. You know what I mean?
Well, not a specific
You
person.
mock the sickle cell in me. Oh my God, I can't even get it.
Anyways,
I've lost it.
But mental health is just as important as physical health. That's my point. Okay?
Yes.
All right? Just because, and this is the funny thing too. You talk about, we say mental health is important. We know mental health is important. Do we fund it? No. Does any therapist take insurance? No, not the good ones. Let's be real. I'm in New York City. You lived in LA. Anybody recommends a therapist, psychiatrist, you go, oh, do they take insurance? They don't take insurance, but they're great. You got to go see them. And then it's like $1,000 out of pocket. And you're like,
at least,
crazy. And here's the thing. They don't have to take insurance because mental health resources are so limited that they know they're going to have a waiting list, like, a line out the door of people who want to see them and are ready to pay the full price. That's what's so crazy. And then if you do want to find someone, and then your company will be like, oh, mental health is important. Here's a hotline to kind of this factory of People who maybe don't even have a license anymore, and then you're going to pay the $30 copay to get advice to like go jump off a bridge. And then people are wondering, oh, it's ridiculous that people are using ChatGPT as their therapist. Hi, maybe if we had a better infrastructure for mental health resources in this country, people wouldn't have to resort to an AI bot. And I think these AI bots are probably pretty helpful. All right. So how about you get us therapists that actually take insurance, and then you won't, have to criticize us for going to ChatGPT for therapy. All right.
I mean, I think Bernie may have missed the mark about AI in that sense. Maybe it's worth it. But
Going off here.
if there's one thing I've come to the conclusion of, as because by the time this airs, I'm actually 49 years old, is that it really just doesn't make sense that the most wealthiest country in the history of man, the country with the most powerful nation that the world has ever seen.
Maybe not when this airs, but yes.
That's true. I mean, right now, today is January 13th, and, we still have Venezuela. Who knows what's happening after that? Who knows the Venezuela status? But it is amazing that if you get sick, you're screwed. And that doesn't even include mental health. And I can even say this, people will be like, oh, whatever, go live somewhere else. I mean, I'm very happy to share the fact that, my dad made a mistake and did not have health insurance for my mom. And once she got diagnosed, we were out of pocket and basically in the hole. And it's kind of funny to say it, but it's the thing. It's like you almost say to yourself, all the money spent over the years, including 7Gs a month now for her care, and you're like, I mean, at least there's Social Security. But it's crazy, like if you get sick, you're screwed. And that doesn't even no one's even thinking about mental health, because mental health is just management.
Right. And
It's
that's
just management.
the same thing. It's like when people say, a patient comes into the ER with a gunshot wound and stage 3 cancer. What are you treating first? The gunshot wound, Allie, because that.
I thought you have to do the wallet biopsy just to see who's actually
Well,
carrying the
you don't want them
insurance.
to bleed out because, you can't treat cancer in a dead patient, right? And I think that is how mental health is treated. And I think luckily, the conversation has moved and we're talking about it, but I don't think the resources and toolkit is quite there yet. And that's what we are here to provide. We are here to provide a toolkit for you to talk to your kids about the importance of mental health, and not just in an aphoristic, like, yeah, it's important, make sure you feel good, but like, how do we do it in a way that is helpful? So, to recap, mental health is not the same as mental illness. Everyone has mental health. We all have brains. Our brains are either healthy or they're not, or they're somewhere in between, and we'll talk about that spectrum. Mental health is all about how our brain and nervous system handle stress, handles feelings, handles connection. That's the relationship piece, and how we recover. Because life happens. Rough things will happen, whether it's, standing on the street and a bus goes by and that puddle, and mud kind of splashes all over your beautiful pink dress. That's the opening of Sex and the City. Or something serious, like you get laid off from your job, or someone in your life dies, or you go through a breakup, or a friend stops talking to you. All of these things affect our mental health, all of them. You don't have to just be fleeing a dangerous dictator to warrant a mental health crisis. It really could be you weren't invited to a party, right? All of these things relate to our mental health. And what we want to talk about is how to get a strong toolkit for yourself and your kid so that you can handle any and all of these situations like a mental health ninja. How about that? Maybe that's what we should call it, the mental health ninjas.
You know what I think is going to be amazing about this? We might just change the perception of mental health in this country, because with our toolkit, which actually comes in a toolbox, but it's actual information in there too. But it could
Send
be
the
shaped like
toolbox,
a hammer.
then you open the toolbox and it's just a piece of paper.
Yeah, like 3x5 index cards, maybe laminated by the time this episode airs. But, I think there is something interesting about the fact that with mental health, you can't literally it's hard to put your finger on it. It's something that's, hard to kind of like grasp in your hand, if you will, like pulling the bullet out from the gunshot wound, from that analogy you shared. But I think, this toolkit thing, this just might be the one. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, mental health check-ins, we all need them. We all need them. Mental health is an ongoing thing. Maybe you can check in with me, Neil. How am I doing?
Yeah, we will. When we turn off the cameras, for sure. I promise you, I will do that. But we're here to talk about the kids now. Why does a mental health conversation feel hard for anyone, especially with kids? Part of it has to do with stigma. We kind of touched on this. We did not talk about this growing up, and it was fairly stigmatized. To be not mentally healthy or not at your best was to be weak, was to be inferior as perceived by society. And you don't get the same type of stigma with most physical ailments. You have a cold, you have the flu, you have a chronic condition, you have diabetes, you have a, God forbid, life-threatening illness. No one goes, well, let's not talk about that. Oh, it's a little bit more, there is more openness about physical health and physical health conversations. So number one is the stigma, and then fear of being labeled. People don't want to be seen as different. It's very much looked down upon, and that kind of hampers the ability to have these conversations. Fear of opening up kind of a Pandora's box that you can't close. I think that with mental health, oftentimes people feel like if they share something, they share a feeling, a scary feeling, a vulnerability, that it can't be unsaid. And so it often causes people to stuff it down and those conversations aren't had. And the truth is, kids are already forming beliefs about mental health, whether you're having these conversations or not, by the time they're in elementary school. So it's not something that, you need to wait or should wait until they're in their teenage years. Mental health, like we've established, is something that affects you as long as you have a mind. And so if you were born with a brain that is functioning, you got mental health. And it's something that you should think about in as much as you're talking to your pediatrician about how do I keep my baby sleeping through the night? How do I keep them happy, healthy, fed? How do I keep them mentally stimulated, safe, regulated? So these are conversations that we need to be having with each other as parents, as peers, but then certainly with our kids as soon as they're able to have them. And that, they're saying, is elementary school. Still with me, Ollie?
I am 100% with you. And yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking about too. Part of it is, and it obviously depends on the kid, but I don't know. Like I said, you always say, I'm a few piano lessons ahead. And thankfully, it's not too guarded, but I almost feel like it does. Of course, elementary school, it all counts and happens, but I feel like there's almost more of a general openness. And then the challenge becomes when, your kid gets older and they don't want to share it all, or it doesn't just come spontaneously. And of course, people have different situations with different kids. Kids are all different. There's different personalities. But I just was thinking about that, how it does, you almost want to start while they're young, to kind of do these to normalize the conversation. You know what I mean? Especially because, believe me, I'm in the zone where he's like, yeah, I don't want to talk about school. It's like, well, just gotta have that ear open, you gotta peek in those text messages. You gotta see what's going on. You gotta be a detective. You gotta be a detective, Neil. That's what's going on in here.
Yeah.
So, am I with you? I'm with you.
Yeah. You're making me think maybe that should be the next season of True Detective. Just a couple dads trying to figure out what's going on with their teens.
Or we could just do a whole True Detective thing. But the real question is who's McConaughey and who's Woody? I think I'd like to have a crack at Woody.
Yeah, it makes
That's the only season I care about.
Never seen that. Never seen it.
More on this later. Let's get back to the topic.
Okay, so the parental instinct often with mental health and mental health challenges for kids is you're the protector. You're mama bear, papa bear. You often, perhaps you've heard this, you're fine. You're okay. You're fine.
I didn't hear it from my dad, but sure.
Yeah, but you've heard it maybe out there.
I've said it.
Yeah, you've said it.
I've read the Berenstain Bears,
Sure.
definitely right there with
This is actually, it's counterintuitive. You think that reassuring your kid is helping them, but in some ways it could invalidate them. And so the instinct to downplay what they're feeling is actually counterproductive. It can be more unhelpful than helpful. And so I think, parents, you want to kind of watch and sit with the feeling and allow your kid to be open and be with them without kind of downplaying it. That's piece one. The other thing, and kind of in tandem with that, is you don't want to push positivity too quickly. Perhaps you've heard of toxic positivity. Oh, hey, think about everything that's great. Sure, all your friends stop talking to you, but think about all the friends you do have. Because what that encourages is avoidance.
Mm.
When you avoid and teach avoidance, it teaches your kids not to talk about things, kind of escape. And we want to learn how to move through these feelings. And so, oh, your friends stop talking to you, that must be really hard. You know, we can talk about that more. How does that make you feel, as opposed to, well, that oh shucks, that really stinks, but let's think about all the good things. It's helpful to reframe for gratitude, but not as the immediate solution. So, you have any experience with that?
Oh my God. I mean, it's, I can literally hear, and it's funny because she just came back in, but I can literally hear Brearley's voice with things right on that thing. Like, she'll be like, literally, it'll come down to things like you acknowledge the feeling, you ask a question, then the perspective comes in. And a lot of times too, some of the countering isn't so much like, well, you have in this example of like, you don't have any other friends. It's not so much, well, what about the friends you do have? It's like your own actions. Like, well, it sounds like you're a good friend to them. And that's kind of as I kind of on the fly here, the kind of the self-empowerment thing, but that's definitely things that come to mind, which is the acknowledgement, questions, and then the reframing comes, and the reframing actually becomes switching it around, which is because in the end of the day, you can't make that kid nice to you. I mean, there are going to be some parents who pick up the red phone and they're like, I don't understand why people aren't nice to my kid, and that happens, and that only makes it more complex.
You're making me think it's like those parents that almost want to, like, baby proof the world for their kids. Remember when your kids are really little and you
Of
put those
course.
rubber things on the sharp edges of tables, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of put bubble wrap and dangerous things up high. And some parents never stop doing that. At
Mm-hmm.
a certain point, you can't baby proof the world. Otherwise, you end up with a David Ellison who's trying to bully his way into acquiring Warner Brothers, because Larry Ellison said, my David will get whatever he wants. And that's not how life works, because I think he's going to lose that lawsuit. I think Netflix is going to acquire WBD.
I mean, I would just say this: there's a deep. We can get into Ellison. We can get into Ellison and his VC money and his real agenda, the real agenda, right?
We yeah,
But
we There's a
the real
great New York Mag article about all this, but we'll get into that.
But there is something to be said, because I guarantee you there are going to be some parents who, well, hey, they wouldn't even touch World's Greatest Dad podcast, but they're not looking for answers. There's a deep philosophical difference between people who just go, no, I am going to baby proof the world. And they do that. We do it as a society. We move to a neighborhood. We choose our friends. We join the country club. We send our kid to private schools and universities. And, oh, we don't associate with these people. That's going to happen. And then there are going to be people who have a different approach, which is, well, I can't get along with everybody, but I'm not going to run away either, And I think you can almost position that to your kids too, because I think when you get into this stuff, right, when you get into the mental health stuff, it becomes the opportunities where you do start to talk to your kids in a more mature level, even early on, because what's funny is when you think about this stuff, these are deep feelings. These are real feelings. They are learning to become adults, when you're talking about at least friendships, that's this it's the start of something that will continue and mature and develop. And I do think that there's something to be said about, you could, again, the reframing, right? It's like, well, do you want to just not ever deal with these people? Do you want to find a way to kind of tolerate it all, and it is like there's almost like you almost have to stop and just say, well, what's the approach here? What are you willing to do? You know, are you willing to tolerate this? Are you willing to go, you know what? I may not be friends with these people. That's okay because I have other friends. I know what's more realistic in surviving life in the long game because you can only do so much with there's only so much padding and tape, Neil. We're going to run out of tape. We're going to run out of that padding.
Sure.
And sure, we could order more at Amazon because Amazon's limitless for now.
Yeah. You said something about, you're learning how to be a grown up or an adult, and I think that's interesting. I would take it a step further. You're learning how to be a human, because I think this is, life is a spectrum, and no one knows that better than Benjamin Button, whether it's going forwards or backwards. It is a spectrum. We are constantly growing or contracting. We are becoming. And so, when does adulthood start? Does it start at 18? Does it start at 20? I think they say our brains aren't even fully formed until mid to late 20s. And so I think if we reframe it as just we're all learning how to exist and coexist, and survive and find fulfillment and have our basic needs met, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so that then we can have our higher needs met, our mental health needs met, and have those tools. I think we'd all be a little bit better off. So let's talk about what mental health is and isn't. Mental health is, and this isn't just me saying it, Ollie, this is according to the WHO, the WHO, not Tommy's the WHO, the World Health Organization.
Those guys, sure.
It's a spectrum. Mental health is a spectrum. It's not a switch, okay? It's not something you can turn on and off, all right? It's a spectrum. Mental health is influenced by biology, environment, relationships, and skills. Let's go through those. Your biology. All right, well, it's kind of a genetic lottery. You come out, maybe you have a predisposition towards certain things. Again, like I have a family history of bipolar and probably OCD, which is why this guy, Environment, this is what you were talking about. The neighborhood you live in, the geographic region you live in, which is also tied to the relationships you're exposed to. This is parental relationships, sibling relationships, friends, mentors, babysitters, nannies, caregivers, folks in the neighborhood.
Au pair. The au pair.
Hey, there you go.
Do you live in a neighborhood with a good au pair?
I don't, but I know people who do. And skills. And skills, these are the things that, again, are taught to you by those people with those relationships, or you pick up on your own. But, of the things you can control, it's the skills, and that's what we're here to give you. Mental health is not a personal failure. Mental health is not a parenting failure. It's not always tied to a diagnosis. Again, we all have mental health. Whether or not we are diagnosed with a mental illness or not, mental health is something that everybody has, as long as we have minds. And it's not something that you just, oh, I have mental health or I don't have mental health. It's like a muscle. I think we look at the Bobby Maximuses of the world, the Greg Scheinmans of the world. If they just stopped hitting the gym, yeah, maybe they'd still be in shape for a month or 2 or 6 or a year. But after a while, it atrophies. And mental health is not so dissimilar. It's something that you need to work on. And if you have that skill set and those tools, it's something that you can kind of keep in shape. And if it's out of shape, or you have a traumatic event, or let's say, I'll make the analogy, you break your leg, you're going to have to know once that leg heals how to get back on that horse. Mixing lots of metaphors here, but that's kind of what I do.
I was just going to say maybe that leg heals and then you go to physical therapy, but you're like, and then I'm going to go horse riding because that's the natural. Once my leg is out of the cast, I got to get on it. I got to go riding a horse.
Let's get personal, Ollie. Talk to me about how 48-year-old Ollie, take him back. When you learned about mental health, when you learned about mental illness, how was it, spoken about in your home growing up? And then as you evolved a little bit later, maybe in your teens, 20s, 30s, and certainly as society has shifted, how has your outlook, obviously you married a therapist, you've evolved. Talk about how mental health was kind of modeled and talked about when you were a kid.
I mean, I will just start with the timeline, really, and you can make sense of it because it's kind of crazy, pun intended. That's not even a pun, it's an accurate description. So I was 4 years old when I believe it was a mental hospital, but my mom was hospitalized because of mental health. I remember loosely a conversation of my dad saying, "Do you want to come home?" I don't know what was going on there, but I remember at least knowing that something was very wrong. It was a scary place. And I don't mean that I was like in some sort of loony bin, but the tenor of the room. It's just one of those weird things to unpack. But so there was that, and then, my mom's schizophrenic. And what the crazy thing is it was probably not until, was it 26? Yeah, it was about almost 10 years ago when I actually heard the words from a physician about what my mom had. So I lived for 38 years without actually knowing what exactly was wrong with her. And my immediate follow-up question to she's schizophrenic is, will I become schizophrenic? And I heard like a big breath come from this doctor, like coming in. And he goes, "How old are you?" And I was like, 38. And he goes, "You're okay." And I was like, literally just sitting there like, wow, this is good to know. I do remember asking my dad, like, can this happen to me? And his answer was, I hope not. Not a lot of conversation, multiple levels of it. Even the psychiatric the psychiatrist who, geriatric psych, who, was in charge of my mom and my dad, actually, at the facility they were at. I remember he said, listen, it's a taboo on multiple levels, culturally as well. So had to deal with that. My mom was carted around, and we basically pretended like nothing was wrong, or my dad did. And it was, probably some of the most uncomfortable, I guess you could call it traumatic moments, I guess, but certainly just like cringy, to borrow a word from Heath's generation, would just be when my mom would hallucinate among my friends in public. I remember I was doing a show in Hollywood, like a sketch comedy show, and there was one of the actors in the set was like, "Oh my God, I saw your mom. She was laughing so hard." And I was like, yeah, she wasn't laughing at the show. She was laughing at the voices in her head. Yeah, just years and years and years of that stuff. And yeah, not a lot of answers. And what's funny too is people people knew. Certainly, the people who would see my mom the most would be the Desi community, the mostly Bangladeshi, but either Bengali or even like just the general Muslim Desi community. They all kind of knew, you know what I mean? And it was always just like, what the hell's going on here? Like you just had this feeling and no one ever said it. As I became older, and I would see friends post-college, I remember one person would be like, "So, how is your mom?" It's like, "Oh, well, you obviously know." And it was like a big old secret. It was a big old secret. And then,
But
cut
an
to,
open secret, and I think that's the
yeah.
thing, right? Is we think that we're protecting, these people and ourselves, but really we're just, kind of getting in a car, gunning it to 100 and not wearing a seatbelt, right? And I'm curious, because we don't talk about this a lot. Do you have a relationship with your mom now? And does Heath know about her? Have they met? Like what's that dynamic?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, we had already moved to Austin, and I had moved my parents from a facility in St. Louis. My dad left his house kicking and screaming. He just wouldn't accept it, but eventually had to because of declining health. And so I moved them to a facility here in Austin. And it was like, okay, cool. Like I could have the ability to be physically present, because before I was in LA, they were in St. Louis, now we're all in one city. And so, yeah, there were times where we've visited, and, all of the stuff I mentioned of just like, I hate to call it just trauma, but just like the cringiness, just the pain, it's pain. My sister-in-law said that once. Yeah, it's painful. It's painful to see your mom because you're just all these years of just like this just come flooding back. But we don't do it often. It's laborious, it's a chore, and it's a real one-way street. Like, she does not understand nor recognize barely or Heath at all. I think one time they came when it was like Mother's Day or some holiday, and she literally said, "Who are you?" I wasn't there. She'll recognize me, but it's like basically it'll go like this. If you were to say, "Hey Neil, come with Ollie to meet his schizophrenic 80-year-old mom," we'd go there. She would smile, she'd give me a big hug, and then she would just kind of shuffle off and kind of like nod her head and basically kind of like be lost in her thoughts. You know what I mean? And every now and then she'd be like, "Do you want?" She'll snap back out of it and say, "Hey, do you want to?" I mean, she won't even have like full on conversations. She basically resists speaking English almost at all times. She literally is, I don't know if you really call it bilingual. I don't know what that is, but she'll say a smattering of English. But that's pretty much it. Like, I probably can't, it's weird to say, but I have a tolerance for about 20-ish minutes. And I don't even think I saw her last year. It's just really, it's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, there's not. I probably spend more time driving up to the facility than I do spending time with her, and that's pretty much it. And we have taken her out to like lunch and stuff. I think we did it for one Thanksgiving, but it's almost like, I don't know, something to feel like you said you've done it. There's nothing meaningful there. Yeah. There's not a meaningful back and forth relationship. I think that's something to just say.
Have you been in therapy about this?
No, I haven't.
You're so well adjusted, I don't know that anyone would say the same about me, and I've been through many years of therapy.
I don't know. Who knows? I mean,
maybe you won the genetic lottery on mental health.
I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know. I feel like through it all, watching my mom be my mom, which is like, that's just, she didn't get all 52 cards, period. You know what I mean? There's that. And then as you've kind of really... I think
maybe they slipped a few of the jokers in instead of the face cards.
Yeah. That's true. She got all jokers. No kings, queens, aces. Maybe a jack. maybe. But and yeah, I don't know. I think I just kind of like, my childhood was at least at home to a degree, especially when I was young, before I turned say 12. It would be like, it was pretty quiet. You know what I mean? I just kind of like watched my dad go one way, my mom be another, and I was like, this is just what it is. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to figure it out.
Decided to be a professional clown.
I know. I mean, I think, yeah. I think when your home life is such a serialized drama, such a heavy drama, it's like, God, maybe I need a little comedy. You know what I mean? Like sitcom. Little sitcom action. Yeah. I don't know how I made it, and who knows if I am.
Paths are so similar and yet different. I was 6 when I watched my mother have a nervous breakdown and also be hospitalized. But again, I'm 8 years younger than you, and so and my mother's, yeah, I mean, probably a decade younger than your mom. And so I don't know if it was just, mental health had advanced, in that decade. But so my mom was diagnosed with bipolar at a time where that was super stigmatized. And not a lot known about it, when it was mostly treated with lithium. And it has been a ride for the last 34 years ever since. But, my mom is medicated, has only gone off her meds, once or twice in the last 3.5 decades, which is like pretty good stats. A lot of bipolar people don't want to be on meds.
Right.
And so we've been able to have a functional, I would say somewhat loving relationship with many fights and trials and tribulations and difficulty. But what you're describing sounds so far from, being able to get anything back. And it's interesting, I think about like my grandfather, my mother's father, who almost definitely, I'm not a doctor, but has also bipolar, potentially like narcissism, all these things, but came up in a time where none of these things were medicated, none of these things were diagnosed, and so as a result has even fewer functional relationships. And I think figuring out how to navigate all these conversations, difficult feelings in a time where you're not encouraged to talk about it openly, where things are super insular, makes it even that much more important to have these conversations with our own kids, which is why we're here. And, not to make it all about us, but, you want to get to know us a little bit. We're these little characters in a box, either piping into your ears or on your little YouTube screen. And I think it's important that we share these stories because it informs the way we approach these conversations with our own kids, right? So back to that, because we're dads and we're the world's greatest dads. What does the research actually say? Well, the core findings about mental health in kids and talking to kids about mental health, kids who can name emotions regulate them better. So simple. I feel sad. I feel angry. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling stressed. These aren't things that I came up, talking about. I felt them, but it wasn't something that was kind of on the table, to kind of just go to my parents in a super vulnerable way. So you want to encourage your kids from a very young age to just name how they're feeling. That's it. Name it. The research shows that suppressing feelings, increases anxiety and depression risk. Depression may not manifest in a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, but certainly those signs can start, and they come from learning to suppress your feelings and your emotions. And so you want to encourage your kids not just to name the feelings, but be open with them. Share those feelings. Parental validation, not downplaying those feelings, is a protective measure and is actually really helpful. So I would say those 3 things: encourage your kid to share the feeling, name the feeling, and then you just validate the feeling. That simple is super, super, super important as a parent. Hey, dad, mom, I'm feeling sad. They shared it, they named it, and then you say, I see that, and thank you for sharing that with me, and I'm here to listen. That alone, sets your kid up for so much success mentally, emotionally. So if we can start there and then build on that, we're already light years ahead of the messed up childhoods we grew up with.
Do you think, because when I think about Heath, because we just have the one, so this is what I'm dealing with, right? He's thus far, he's not guarded. When I hear about this stuff, I think oh, this is huge if you have a kid that doesn't show their emotions. And you have to go, what's going on? Be more open. And it helps, How are your kids? And it's funny because part of me, it's oh, they're 5 and 7. It must be so easy because obviously Heath's gotten older and he's going to be more selective about what he shares because that's he's a teen. But how are your kids? Are they guarded or are they whatever? I just
Well, it's
are
so
they
interesting. I think you have this tendency probably when you have one kid to often think, oh, this is how kids are. We have the good fortune of having the A/B test, one boy, one girl, and different personalities. And so we did find, and I don't know how much of this is related to birth order or gender or, a myriad of different things. But for whatever reason, our daughter is an open book. She will tell us every thought, every feeling. She's the Tracy Flick precocious. She's having conversations with adults, at a kid's birthday party, and they're she is so fun, to talk to. She will say, and then we did this in class, and then we read this, and then the teacher said this. And now our son, how was school? I didn't go to school today. Where were you for the last 7 hours? I was at the beach. He's just messing with us, he doesn't want to talk about anything. And so it is more of a challenge to
Wait,
get
he's 5, right? He's 5. I mean, I feel like this is what Heath will say sometimes, I mean, we're getting, I feel like glimpses of this now. I'm talking yesterday, and Zeke's like this now at 5.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'll brag for a second. Sheer wouldn't like me doing this, but she doesn't listen to these episodes, so we're all good. He counted backwards from 100 yesterday. And we were like, that's really impressive. And then we were like, hey, can you do that by 2s? And he did it by 2s. And it seems like he has a real aptitude for math and reading. And we're like, I think this kid's really smart. And I think back to a year ago in pre-K, his teacher told us, he's answering things wrong, but I know he knows the answer. He was getting things wrong on purpose because I think he was bored. He was like trying to keep it interesting for himself. And all I could think was, I said to my wife, my favorite film is Good Will Hunting. That scene where, where he's like, I'm sorry this is hard for you. And he's lighting it on fire. He's like, you know how fucking easy this shit is for me? You know how fucking easy? And it's like, that's Zeke. That's Zeke. Zeke is Will Hunting, who, by the way, Will Hunting came from a really tough childhood, was not emotionally regulated. We're going to try to change that for our son.
Yeah, I know. It's so weird to even go, oh yeah, my kid's like Will. And you're like, I don't know. I mean, talk about needing a therapist for sure.
He had a great therapist. He had a great group of friends. Great job as a janitor. I mean, life could not have gotten better.
Yeah, I mean, except for, the drunk dad thing. The drunk beating dad thing. That, even Ben Affleck can't solve that,
He tried.
Not a bad Batman either. Let's be honest. He was a much better Batman than Clooney.
Bar is so low, Ollie.
It is what it is. Hey, look at me.
I just Keaton, Bale, Adam West, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Ben Affleck.
Whoa, Affleck is above Clooney. He was above Kilmer. We're going to have to put a pin in that one and really dive into that later. But I respect the Adam West. I respect the heck out of the Adam West. Back to...
You ready for the toolkit?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also ready to, you know what? Let's have Zeke just do some scenes from Good Will Hunting. Age appropriate, of course. You know what I mean? I could, if you had him do that with like kindergarten homework, I'm sorry, this is hard for you. And he's like burning up like a touch and feel book. I would.
It's been a minute, so I'll pull it out. I think, speaking of, I gotta, get the muscle memory going, but my party trick used to be, sad thing about a guy like you is about 5 years, you're going to do some thinking on your own and come to the fact that there are two certainties in life. One, don't do that. And two, you just dropped 150 grand on the education you could have got for $1.50 in late charges at the public library. Yeah, maybe. At least I'll have a degree. You'll be serving my kids fries on our way to a skiing trip. yeah, maybe. But, hey, at least I won't be unoriginal. But, you want to talk about that? We could take it outside, figure it out. Yeah, man. It's cool.
Who was that guy? Who was the actor in that?
The long blonde hair guy?
Yeah. I think it was Reddish for sure.
I don't know.
Just kind of, one of those 90s guys. This is a terrible sidebar. We will get to the toolkit, but since we're relishing in Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
I resented that movie when it came out. I was on my high horse. I was like, this isn't a real Gus Van Sant. I resented its success. I resented the mainstream of it all. And much like The Departed, actually, it's so eminently rewatchable, especially in the short form era, where it's like, let me just see clips. And like, it's remarkable that those guys, at any age really, but at that age, were like, we're going to write this and make a movie. It's just a good movie. And what's funny is, like, I remember it not being like as crazy or as intense or as weird as My Own Private Idaho. And then I look at the era we're in now, and you're like, man, talk about that was literally like Shakespeare compared to the swill we're in now. Except for this toolkit we're about to get into.
We ready? Here's the A through H toolkit on how to talk to your kids about mental health. Tool A, ask before you label. You want to say to your kid, what does it feel like in your body? When is this feeling happening the most? Out of your wife's playbook, ask questions. Avoid saying you're anxious, you're depressed, you're sad. Label your kids. Let them tell you how they're feeling. That's tool A. Ask questions before labeling. Tool B, validate. Say to your kids, that sounds really heavy. Don't add, you'll be fine, or it's going to be okay. It feels like a parental instinct to protect them, but really, that's not validating your kids. Validate. That sounds hard. That sounds difficult. Thank you for sharing that with me. That's tool B. Tool C, externalize the experience. You want to say things like, it sounds like the worry in your brain is being really loud today. Why does this matter? You want to separate your kid from the struggle itself. This isn't who they are, that's just what's going on in their brain. You want to reduce shame and helplessness. This isn't part of their identity, it's something that they're working through. It's something that's happening inside of them. Yeah.
Is that for the parents check in, or is that something you verbalize to them?
Yeah. No, you could say that to your kid. You can say it
Okay.
sounds like your anger is really strong today. It sounds like it's being really loud in your brain.
I see. Like it sounds like
It's
I'm
really
getting the
loud.
sense you're getting angry right now. So it's like you're kind of like recognizing it as a you're recognizing the time and place, which is immediate versus permanent. Like, well, you've always been an angry child, Neil. So par for the course.
I have. Tool D. So that's tool C, externalize the experience. Tool D, teach regulation before reasoning. And this is that whole thing about you can't have a logical, reasonable conversation with someone who's not emotionally regulated. I'm sure you've experienced this, especially when your kids are really little and they're flailing, you took my Cheerios, and and you can't be, well, you're actually being unreasonable right now. No, you got to regulate first because when you're dysregulated, you can't solve problems, right? And so, tool D, teach your kids to regulate themselves before reasoning, even with themselves. How do you do that? Breathe, move, ground yourself. There's this great thing. I'm probably going to bungle it, but it's like name 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, and 1 thing you can taste. I don't know. And those types of
Whoa.
things. Yeah. And if you're having a panic attack or if you're just dysregulated, exercises like that help you breathe, help you slow down, can help you regulate. So tool D, teach regulation before reasoning. Tool E, you want to normalize support seeking, okay? Early, early, early. So you want to
Hmm.
frame therapy like it's just the doctor for the brain. When I was really going through it a few years ago and I was really resistant to going back to therapy, my wife said, if you had a heart condition, would you go to a doctor? I said, of course. She said, how is this different? How is this different? It's your brain. It's a doctor for your brain. So we just want to make it feel like normal, just like going to get your vaccinations, just like, I know, political, right? Just like going to get, your daily,
Ice water.
your checkup, your yearly checkup. It's just going to the doctor. It's just a tune-up. It's just
Yeah.
maintenance.
Oil change. I feel like we'll be able to reach a lot of people by saying, "Hey, you gotta get your oil changed." You know what I'm saying,
There you
brother?
go. Get your oil changed in your brain. That's a good metaphor. Seek support early. And this is the other thing is, it doesn't have to be catastrophic. Catch it earlier. Don't wait till it's at stage 5. You stage 1, stage 2, you're not feeling so great in the old noggin. Seek help. So normalize support seeking. Talk to your kids about mental health help you've sought out on your own. Maybe if you see a therapist, talk about it. My kids see me take my Zoloft every morning. Oh, it's just daddy's brain medicine. No biggie.
Mm.
Not a secret.
Mm.
150 milligrams changed my life, baby.
Really?
Yeah. We'll talk about that on another episode. But
I mean,
tool F, track patterns, not just bad days. So if your kid day after day after day for a number of weeks is really struggling with their mental health, you want to look at the duration. How long are these struggles lasting? Are they interfering with their daily life? How intense are they? Because sometimes they're just having a bad day, and that doesn't mean that their mental health is poor overall. Sometimes LeBron's having an off night. Sometimes your kid's having a meltdown, and their mental health is still pretty strong, but we're all human. And, we lose it as adults. Why shouldn't kids lose it every now and again? So you really want to track patterns in your kids' mental health, not just one-off isolated incidences. So look out for patterns. That's tool F. Tool G, model mental health language at home. Say things yourself as the grown up. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need to take a break. My wife and I do this all the time. Sometimes, like over long breaks where we're not away on vacation and we're just stuck in our little box in New York City, greatest city in the world, by the way, and it's cold out and we're all just kind of getting a little cabin fever. We say, I'm going to take a break, and one of us will leave and go to the bedroom and just cool off because you need to do that. We all need to do that. And if our kids can see us taking a break, stepping away, and then coming back a little bit more regulated, they're going to learn to do that on their own. So model mental health language. The skills are important, you know? Do as I do, not as I say. You know what I'm saying?
I like that. That's huge. That is, especially as parents. It is the
I
do.
just came up with that. Do as I do, not as I say.
You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
You're kidding.
No.
Really?
Yeah, I just thought.
So who needs ChatGPT? I just need Zoloft.
No.
150 milligrams.
Well,
Oh my God. If we can get Zoloft, we gotta tag Zoloft on this. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it.
okay. Thinking about it. Tool H. Anchor safety and belonging. This one comes up a lot. You want your kids to know that they are safe here, no matter what feeling they express, no matter what's going on in their brain. This is your safe space. We talk about you can't baby-proof the world, but you can still baby-proof your home, right? This is the place. This is the fortress of solitude. That's the point, is you can say every difficult feeling. You're angry at someone. You want to just let it all out, unleash. That's where you can do it, is at home. Let's work through it here together. This is the gym for your emotions. Your home with your parents. This should be the safest place, right? You go into the world, you go into the classroom, you go into the workplace, you go on to the playground, and things get a little bit more complicated and difficult, and you're dealing with everybody else's emotional baggage and history and insecurities. But here at home, this is the place you can work it out. And so that's super, super, super important. Tool H. Anchor safety and belonging at home. And that's your mental health toolkit.
I mean, just hearing some of this stuff, it makes you realize how insane it is that we don't talk about mental health all the time, because these things are so important. And like, as much as, it's funny, there's a real cliche, the old male cliche of like, hide your feelings, or, oh my God, I saw somebody with a hat. Matt, oh my God, talk about a person who clearly could use a little empathy for empathy, if you will. He was walking, and I could only read the side of his ball cap, and the side of the ball cap said, "Nobody cares, work harder." Nobody cares, work hard. I could only imagine what the front said, okay? And this is the thing, like, this is not, to quote to the Mandalorian, this is not the way. This is not the way. The way is, and it's so true, we actually had this the other day in a little moment where we really said it to Heath. It's like, this is your space. This is your safe space. And as much as I was saying, oh, you can't baby-proof the world, yes, you can't. But you absolutely have to make a fortress of solitude for yourself somewhere. Probably your home seems like the best place. Maybe it's a car. Maybe it's a park. Maybe it is in Antarctica. Although, given the way things are with the environment, it may not be the best real estate decision. Greenland isn't either. Let's not even go to the Arctic. But having the mental idea of a fortress of solitude, even if it is the bedroom in your... What are you, in a 2-bedroom? You in a 3-bedroom in Brooklyn over there?
You've got a 3.
Wow, there you go. Well, hey, you deserve it. Yeah, you need to have a fortress of solitude in one of those 3 bedrooms. It's so important. Like, yeah, like this toolkit is like what everybody needs. I think if we had this, there'd be less traumatic acts of violence. I do believe that. I absolutely really believe that.
You're biased. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it is in your self-interest to say that our toolkit from the world's greatest dad is going to lower rates of violence in the world. But I actually agree with you, Ollie. I think this toolkit is life-changing. Should we just morph into like total, like those people we see on Instagram? Like, this is going to change your life. With this toolkit, you will have a child who's emotionally regulated, who is amazing, who is going to Harvard. Like, we don't know. We're just doing our best. We're the world's greatest dads. We're just figuring it out, like you. We're just trying to help a little bit,
You
I'm not gonna
need this
pretend
toolkit. You need to buy this toolkit.
right
This
now.
is a toolkit that sells itself because it makes the world a safer place. We've sold a lot of toolkits over the years, but this toolkit has been shown in theoretical studies to curb violence.
I like that. Let's now go through the kind of mental health toolkit tips by age, as we often do. If you have kids from age 3 to 5, this is when they're having those big feelings in little bodies. This is where you're sometimes seeing a kid melt down because they're hungry, they're tired, they don't know how to communicate their needs. You think about what a grump you turn into when you're hungry, and you're a grown man, and you know how to
Yeah,
communicate it, and you can
yeah.
be such an ornery fellow when you're just hungry. Now imagine you're 3. So this is where you really want to focus on naming the feelings and teaching kids to follow their body cues. Hey, I think you're feeling a little tired. Why don't we go take a nap? Are you feeling hungry? Would you like a snack? We got to teach kids and ourselves to listen to our bodies, to name our feelings. You want to avoid long explanations. They can't handle them yet. And you really want to make sure that your kid feels regulated. All right, 3 to 5. Make sure they're regulated. Make sure their basic needs are met. Make sure they're naming their feelings. Make sure they're following their own body cues.
Make sure they're fed.
Yes. Ages 6 to 9. They're starting to wonder, why do I feel this way? It's a little bit getting into what my daughter's, saying, I don't know why I feel so sad right now. You can start to introduce the concepts of stress, of worry. Talk about these more complex emotions. It's not just happy, sad, but feeling overwhelmed. They can handle it. We can get into those higher level concepts with them. And this is where we're going to start to teach coping skills and normalize that feelings come and go. Maybe you've heard this, Ollie. They're like waves in the ocean. Sometimes a really big wave comes and it passes. And that's feelings, and you just kind of ride the wave. And we got to learn how to ride the wave. So that's age 6 to 9. Ages 10 to 12, kids might start to ask, what's going on with me? What if something is wrong with me? So not only are they confused by the feelings, but they're starting to internalize it and wonder if it's part of who they are as a person. So you want to watch out for shame narratives at this age. We want to avoid our kids kind of diving into feeling this deep shame. And you want to help them separate their own identity from this experience, right? We were talking about externalizing the feelings that you're going through in your brain. So we want to help with that for ages 10 to 12. And this is also a time where you want to introduce trusted adults beyond parents. That might mean a mental health professional. It might mean a teacher, a guidance counselor, a school nurse, somebody that they can talk to, who they can trust beyond just the parents. It does take a village. As Hillary Clinton told us, that whole line has been co-opted by basically anyone and everyone, but it takes a village. Then we're going to get into teens, where you're at. Now, the whole thing with teens is the key risks to look out for are secrecy and self-diagnosis with social media, right? These kids now have tools at their disposal. They've got their own smartphones, their own internet access. They might be trying to diagnose themselves. You want to make sure that they still are coming to you, that you're still very vigilant and keeping their mental health on your radar. So as much as you can, kids and teens really value their privacy. You got to find ways to be creative and get them to open up. What helps with this? Listen, listen, listen. Don't try to fix unless they ask you to. Don't offer solutions. Just listen, be there, validate. Make sure that your kid has autonomy to make their own decision. You're not going to say, well, you got to handle it this way, but that you're there to support. It's your life. It's your choice. I am here to help. How can I help? And that's really important too. And my wife will do this a lot. She'll ask our daughter, do you want me to listen or do you want a solution? Sometimes my daughter will say, I want you a solution. I want you to help me solve it. Remember Tracy Flick? But a lot of times they just say, no, I just want you to listen. They just want to get it off their chest. A lot of times teenagers just want to be heard, and you want to empower them to be able to do that. And that's the age by age guidance for how to handle mental health challenges and mental health conversation with your kids.
I'll tell you, this age, this teen thing, it's like you're basically going, well, I hope I don't say something that's only gonna piss him off more. It's like you really, it is the art of subtlety. You know what I mean? It's like you really, I don't know. You can't come off as the hard sell right here. I'll tell you, at least that's where we're at right now. Got to be really, really just move cautiously. Chess. It really is chess. It's really chess. This
Parenting
is
is
chess right
chess.
now. Well, approaching feelings, you do so like really smoothly, real spy stuff, real cloak and dagger.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's close this up. Couple final thoughts. Mental health, just to recap, it's not about preventing pain. It's about teaching how to recover from real life situations, difficult situations. They will happen. It's not a question of if, but when. That is the state of being. It's part of being alive. And your mental strength is tied to having the skills to self-regulate. And that's what we're trying to teach our kids here. So, remember, I think Chet Garner said it best. He said, in reference to football, he said that a coach told him, you don't coach your son, we coach your son. You just be there to support him. And it's not so dissimilar here. The advice is, don't be your kid's therapist. Just be their safe place. You're not a mental health professional. You don't have to pretend to be. You just have to be there to give them a hug, to listen, to support them. And then if the time comes where they do need a professional, that you encourage them and guide them to that professional, and that they know that it's okay and normal.
I found like it really helps, like, because whether you realize it or not, your kid's going to want to have another adult in their life to just bounce things off of. It's important, that's the path to like growing up. So I think it is important to encourage that stuff. And I think, just creating a safe space. It makes me think about how many times we've heard this, like, when we ask the dads, like, what do they want? What do you want years from now? Or how do you want to be remembered? And a number of dads will say, I want them to remember that I could come to my dad for everything. And in order to do that, you have to be someone that is going to be comforting. So think about all what that really means and what that would mean for you. Like, what does it mean to know that there's someone you can talk to who comforts you? I think that's a good way to look at it. And mental health, this should be talked about all the time. My God, should be talked about all the time. It's one of the things that we can actually have a hand in, unlike, the whole gunshot wound thing. Unless, we do have a physician coming up, which I think we might soon.
Yeah. No, we're going to teach tourniquet safety.
Totally. Bite on this.
We're going to leave it there. Thanks for joining us on this Big Questions episode about kids and mental health.
And I hope you enjoy your toolkit.